Hey folks, welcome to the Ramble. I wanted to follow up a little bit on a video that I posted last week called How Long Are We Going to Keep Arguing About This? And in that video, I suggested that the process through which we defeat bad ideas is actually a two-step process. We don't just defeat bad ideas by countering them with good ideas. We then have to follow that up with denying platforms to people who push the ideas that we've decided are bad ideas. We have to stop arguing over the bad ideas and stop treating the bad ideas as though they are topics for debate and argument and as though they have legitimacy. And one of the most common objections to that argument is to ask, well, who's going to make these decisions? Who decides what is a bad idea? Who decides who gets a platform and who doesn't? It's the appeal to the gray area, the appeal to ambiguity, the argument that says, well, outlawing hate speech might sound like a good idea at first, but how do we determine what speech is hate speech? Or cracking down on online harassment on Twitter and YouTube, etc. Yeah, that sounds like a good idea, but who decides what is harassment and what is allowable? And they don't really have an answer. They don't really have any idea how to do that. Their point is you just shouldn't bother trying to solve the problem at all, because as long as there's a gray area where the judgment could go either way, in their mind, it's better to just pretend that the problem doesn't exist, and just don't try to regulate it, don't try to deal with it at all. Just keep your hands completely off, because if there's going to be certain times when you won't be sure what the right decision is, then you should just don't make any decisions about anything. It's a stifling tactic. It's a suppression tactic. It's a way of saying, oh, don't stop trying to solve this problem. You'll never find a perfect solution, so just stop trying to solve the problem. So that's one reason why I think that it's just not a very good objection, not a very substantive objection. But the other reason is I think that it misunderstands either honestly or willfully. It misunderstands what it's actually responding to. Because the answer to the question, who decides who gets a platform and who doesn't, who decides what speech is good and what speech is bad, or what ideas are good and what ideas are bad, is the same entities that make those decisions now. The point isn't to take the decisions of who gets a platform and who doesn't, or what speech or what ideas are good and what ideas are bad, away from those entities that are making those decisions now and put them into the hands of different entities. The point is to encourage those making those decisions now to make different decisions. So if we're talking about a person who, let's say a person who is invited to address a group at a college, and let's say that this person who has been invited is a figure who, I don't know, just to pull an example out of the clear blue sky, someone who has a history of harassing transgender students at the college from the stage, or threatening to reveal personal information about students at the college who may be from undocumented immigrant families. Just pulling examples out of the air. And let's say that such a person was invited by a student group, say the college Republicans, just pulling things out of the sky here, to address their group or to participate in some event. And let's say that there are some students in that college community who think that that is a terrible decision, and they don't want that person to be invited to their campus to talk. They don't want their college to be a part of giving this person a platform, because this person has a history of being abusive, and this person says things that are racist and misogynist and anti-feminist and xenophobic and just hateful and hurtful and terrible, and they don't want such a person to be welcomed on their campus, and they don't want their ideas to be granted anything like an air of legitimacy on their campus. The solution is not to argue that the college Republicans or the faculty or whatever body it is that ultimately decides this person is allowed to come, has that decision taken out of their hands. The point is to prevail upon those decision makers, those gatekeepers, if you will, to make a different decision. And they still would have the right to make whatever decision they're empowered to make. You know, if a bunch of students get together and raise a protest and email and call and show up at offices and say, we don't want this person to come here, the school or the organization or the venue, whatever, would still have the option to decide, in spite of the protests, that the event should continue, that the person who was invited is still allowed to come. They still have the right to make that decision. The point isn't to remove their right to make that decision. The point is to encourage them to make a different decision. One of the most common responses from people to arguments like the ones I made in that "How long are we going to keep arguing about this" video is to say, well, but if someone's invited to a venue, then they have a right to go. You know, if someone was invited to address the college Republicans at such and such university, they have a right to go. Yes, they do, as long as the terms of their invitation stand. It's not an absolute right. If you were invited to address the college Republicans, let's just say, at such and such university, and then the college Republicans change their mind, or the university steps in and says, whoa, we don't want this to happen, or the people in charge of the venue that you were going to hold the event at change their minds and say, no, we don't want any part of it, then you don't have a right. Your right is reliant on the indulgence of the people who invited you. And if they change their mind and say, actually, no, we don't want this to happen, then none of your rights have been violated as the person who was invited. They change their minds, and they have every right to change their minds, assuming there's not like a contractual thing. Obviously, if you're invited and you sign some sort of a contract that says, okay, I get to come, or I get paid this amount, or whatever, those are all separate considerations. All things being equal, if you are invited to address a group at a college, and then the group rescinds the invitation, then they have every right to rescind the invitation, and no right of yours has been violated by them rescinding that invitation. And it is completely within the rights of other people in the community who heard about that invitation to come forward and say to the group, hey, I think you made a mistake. I think you should reconsider. I think you should pull back that invitation. I don't think this person should be coming here. It's completely within their rights to do that. Now, it's not ultimately their decision. They can put pressure, they can protest, they can object, but ultimately it's whoever's decision it is. It's the student organization, it's the faculty, it's the people who are in charge of booking the venue, whoever's decision it is. It's still ultimately their decision. And I am certainly not advocating that it not be their decision. All I'm saying is, I think that they should make a different decision. I think they should make what I would call a better decision. I know for myself personally, because another thing that folks like to say is, because they like to accuse people who make the argument that I made of being authoritarian, as though I want to personally make all these decisions myself. And that is not the case. People are entitled to make their own decisions about the venues that they control, as long as they are doing so within the boundaries of the law or within the boundaries of whatever regulatory structure in which they exist and they work. But I will say this, if it were my decision, if I did have control over a venue, or I was a member of an organization and I had a voice in the decision-making process to decide who got invited to address the organization and who didn't, I would strenuously object and do whatever I could within my abilities, within my powers, to prevent people who are pushers of racism and misogyny and anti-feminism and xenophobia and transphobia and homophobia from being invited to address the group, from being given a platform that we control. Because I think not only is that a waste of time and counterproductive, but I think it is harmful. I think it is harmful to grant a platform and to grant a feeling, a sense of legitimacy to people who push such ideas. And who decides what is bigoted, who decides what is racist, who decides what is anti-feminist and what is homophobic and what is transphobic. In that situation, I do. If it's my decision, I decide. If you're asking to use a venue that I control, then it's my decision. And I don't make that decision in a vacuum. If people are protesting and saying this person is bad, don't let this person speak, I make the decision within the context of that. And there may be people on the other side saying, no, you should let this person speak. This person should be allowed to speak. What they're saying deserves to be heard for one reason or another. I make the decision in that context as well. I make the decision if it's my venue that is up for the asking. I know about a very, very tiny bit of this because I do control a platform, a very small platform, a not terribly significant platform, but I control the platform of my YouTube channel. This tiny little slice of YouTube that is mine, that I control. I control it at the pleasure of YouTube. I have to follow their guidelines. I have to agree to their terms of service. I have to accept their authority and their ability to ultimately decide what I put up and what I am and aren't allowed to do. But within those guidelines, within those boundaries, I control what goes on my YouTube channel. And if someone wanted to put content on my YouTube channel, whether that was in the form of asking me to put up one of their videos or asking me to host them in a hangout or some kind of interview segment on my channel, or even leaving a comment on one of my videos, if they ask me to host content that I don't want to host on my channel, then that's it. The decision has been made, and it's up to me. Just like it's up to whoever books the venue or whoever makes the decisions about who to invite to address a group or whoever makes the decision of who is allowed to address people on a college campus or isn't allowed to address people on a college campus. And look, I'm sure that there will be people who will try to take what I said in this video and spin it into something sinister and authoritarian, even though I think I did a fair job of explaining that that's not what I am advocating for, and that's never been remotely what I have ever advocated for on this issue. But there will be folks who will try to distort what I've said and mischaracterize my views on this, as certain folks have done before. And I don't really have any control over that. I can't control what people put on their platforms or what people allow on their platforms. If people want to post dishonest things or misleading things or bigoted things on their platforms, it's not in my power to stop them unless they try to do it on my platform. And that's the point. I control what goes on my platform. Other people control what goes on their platforms. And if someone wants to use their platform to host something that is toxic and harmful, I and other people who feel like they may be affected by such a thing have a right to speak out and to try and persuade them to make a different decision. And we may not succeed. They may still make the decision they were going to make originally, despite our protests. And they have their right to do that. But we have the right to try and get them to make a different decision. We have the right to object and to protest and to plead with them to not use their platform to host harmful, toxic, bigoted speech, because that actually doesn't do anybody any good except for the people who feel empowered by that speech and who may one day feel emboldened enough to try and carry it out. And when you talk about things like that, objecting to that kind of speech, that kind of rhetoric, that kind of ignorance, that kind of hate being given a platform is not just a right, it's a responsibility. Hey folks, thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed this one. If you did, please like, share, and subscribe. And also please consider helping me to make more videos like this one by supporting this channel through Patreon. You can go to patreon.com/Steve Shives to become a patron of this channel. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you next time.